special council meeting of April 11th. We're to discuss our strategic planning process and start making some progress on that file from council's perspective. First thing I guess we should do is adopt the agenda. Could I get a mover and a seconder to do so? Councillor Burke and Councillor McCabe. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's carried. Any declaration of pecuniary interest on anything on today's agenda? I have none to declare. Councillor Burke?
No.
Councillor McCabe?
I have none.
Councillor Hearn?
I do not.
And Councillor Rankin?
None.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Brooke, to give us the intro.
And yes, I'll just welcome everyone again to the strategic planning session. We're looking forward to the discussion today. I'd like to introduce Chris Cummings, who is our consultant helping us with this project. And he'll be facilitating the day's session for you as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Chris with the green light on.
Thanks very much, Brooke. Mayor Lennox, members of council, it's a pleasure to meet all of you. I'm going to start over here just with a few slides, just to review the strategic planning process in general at a high level. It'd be a good opportunity for any questions of clarification about the process or anything like that. But then we're actually going to get right into it with a bit of a brainstorming session for this first meeting. Just by way of introduction, Brooke mentioned that I'm with Doable Consulting. We're a small consulting firm. A lot of people say that we're really good at consulting and really bad at business because everything that we do is pretty much custom. So we try not to do anything canned in the way that we work. And we hope that that means we do a really good job of reflecting what a community or an organization has to say. About half of our work is strategic planning, and about half of our work as a whole is done in Guelph Wellington. The other half of our work is done provincially and federally. So we have kind of a nice mix of organizations and experiences in terms of who we work with. But we're really excited to be working with all of you. I've had the pleasure of working with Brooke in the past and have heard great things about working with the township. So I want to thank you for having me here, and I look forward to getting started. So we're going to share some slides, and we'll do a bit of an overview. Okay, so two main parts of our work together today. The first is to do an overview of the strategic planning process. And the second, you'll notice a whole bunch of flip charts around the room. I'll apologize in advance for my penmanship, but I'll put the slides up on the screen as well so that you can actually read the questions that I'm asking you as we go. Our process includes basically three broad phases. So we'll be providing a number of kind of general project supports to the staff team as we go through the process of developing your strategic plan. That'll include ongoing project management meetings, a lot of data analysis supports, communication supports, and kind of general advice as we go. Kind of the more exciting parts, though, are part two, which we've sort of called discernment, and that's all about figuring out what might be the priorities for the township moving forward. I say might because that's kind of a brainstorming phase. We don't expect that people will know exactly what the priorities should be yet. So we want to give everyone, including council and staff and community members, an opportunity to kind of think out loud and to not necessarily guess, but to guesstimate based on your experiences living and working in the community or the communities that make up the township. What you think some of the priorities are that should be considered for the township over the next few years. This kicks off today with this session, but it also includes a lot of staff engagement and then some ongoing key pauses along the way to make sense of what we've heard so far and to try to figure out what we should be taking a closer look in next phases of the project. And that, by the time we hit summer, includes talking to community members and business owners and other key constituents throughout the township to kind of pressure test what it is that we've been hearing so far, to see if what's coming forward is making sense to the community, whether they would prioritize something that we might not have yet, or whether they would increase the emphasis on one thing and decrease it on something else. So we've got that opportunity to take the work forward and actually run it past people before we do the final plan development. And we're aiming to have that done. Here's what it looks like from a timing perspective. We're aiming to have that final plan developed and out there for your consideration by September and October of this year. So I'll pause here at this point just to see if there's any questions anyone would like clarification on in terms of the process before we dive in for today. Okay, we're good. So this is going to feel a little bit different than probably a typical session. And I hope that it gives everybody an opportunity to kind of put their thinking caps on a little bit, to reflect a little bit, and to kind of weigh a mixture of things, both your own experiences as people who live and work in the township, the insights that you have from being on council, the things that you hear from community members about what matters. And those could be the things that people really like about the township, both broadly as a community, but also the township as a corporation. And they can also be the things that, you know, are kind of sore points for people where there's opportunities to be able to improve or to be able to develop over the next few years. But one thing about today that I'm hoping is a good opportunity for all of us is that there are no decisions to be made today. Today's very much about brainstorming, and anything that goes onto the paper today is something that will get a lot more thought and a lot more reflection before it ever actually gets written in ink. So you can kind of think of today as being a day where you're writing in pencil. It can be erased. We will test it to see if it makes sense later. So there's no such thing as a bad idea today. And you can kind of feel comfortable to brainstorm and know that all of the work that goes forward from this session will also be combined with the work that staff are doing and then tested with the community before anything actually gets finalized. So we're going to do a lot of moving around today, a lot of kind of individual thinking, as well as some group discussion. So you can probably see on the walls around you that there are a whole bunch of questions waiting for us. And roughly these questions break down into four main categories. So the first category, 1 and 2, over on the wall over here, are broad questions about Wellington North as a community. So here we'll be asking you to think about, broadly speaking, if you were talking to somebody that you knew and trying to convince them to move to Wellington North, these are the brag points. You know, these are the things that you would say to someone, whether they're a colleague or a friend. This is why I love living and working in Wellington North. So our first question there would be, what are some of the best things about Wellington North as a community? It can be absolutely anything at all. It's broad. It's not specific to the township as a corporation. Here we're talking about Wellington North and all of the communities within it. Second question that we'll look at there would be, what are some of Wellington North's potential untapped potentials? So in other words, where could the community grow and develop and improve in ways that it hasn't had the opportunity to yet? So if the community were to try to tap into some untapped potentials, what might they be? So 1 and 2 are, what are some of the best things about the community broadly, and what are some areas for potential improvement? The next theme that we'll go on to broadly are questions 3 and 4. And here's where we're going to start talking about the township as a corporation. So here we're not necessarily talking broadly about the communities, but instead we're talking specifically about the township and its work and the services that it offers. And we'll ask you to identify the top strengths of the township. In other words, what are the things that you're most proud of about the work that the township does? And we'll also look at areas of potential improvement for the township. So you can think about kind of those pain points where from time to time, despite the fact that that everybody is doing their best efforts all the time, you might think to yourself, I wish we could do a better job at that. So questions 3 and 4, top strengths, and then potential improvements for the township as a corporation. And then we're going to, and this is a biggie, it's kind of split across a few spots in the room. We're going to weigh in on the results that came out of the community satisfaction survey that recently happened. And so question 5 is kind of digging into the fact that the township had a really high satisfaction rating from the members of the community who weighed in through that survey, like so high that you don't often see that kind of a high score. So that means there's some really good stuff going on. And so our question here is, what's driving that? When you're hearing from your constituents or when you're thinking about your own life living and working here, what are some of the things that you think are driving that high level of satisfaction? In other words, it's the good stuff that we don't want to lose track of. The next area that we'll go to is a huge question over here, question 6, and we're looking at what the ideas might be to improve the priorities from the survey. So community members did acknowledge that there could be areas for improvement, and even though the satisfaction rates are still generally fairly high, they did give 6 priorities for consideration. So specifically, recreation facilities, activities and events, road maintenance and repair, community safety in terms of policy and bylaw, affordable housing, growth management, and communications between community members and the township. So all of those had generally high satisfaction rates as well, but we're going to see if we can think of any possibilities that we could put on the list to consider as ways to improve in each of those areas. So you could think about any correspondence or any feedback that you're getting from members of the community and or experiences that you've had yourselves, and think about identifying some of those pieces. So that's a big chunk of the work that we're going to be doing today. But I did mention that this would be a brainstorm and that we'd be moving around the room a fair bit. So you should notice on the desk in front of you that you have a black Sharpie marker, and you also have a stack of either gold or orange rectangular Post-it notes. And as we go through these questions section by section, I'm going to ask you to actually think about your responses individually and silently first, and then put your responses down on these Post-it notes. And so I'll typically ask you for anywhere from usually 2 or 3 responses per question. And what I ask is that when you put your responses down on your Post-it note, you put 1 response per note. So don't put all 3 responses on a single Post-it note, kind of break them up. And I'll also ask you to sort of record your responses in about 5 words. So you can kind of keep it to what you might see as like a newspaper headline or something along those lines. So any of your responses, try to keep them to, 5 words or a single sentence. and we'll go with one answer per Post-it note. We'll take these sections one at a time. People will get a few minutes, so don't feel rushed. You've got time to think about these things. We'll take a few minutes for each one of these so that each person has a chance to write your responses down on your Post-it notes. We'll get them up on the wall and proceed through all of this. You don't have to put your names or anything like that on it. It won't be graded. At the end of the session, we'll probably take a quick break so that we can quickly take stock of everything that we have up. And then we'll ask you to go through again and kind of respond to each other's work, to what you see there as a whole, to see what the big themes are that we could maybe walk away with at this point in time. And that will take us to our last question, which would be, what might be some of the emerging priorities that we should be thinking about and testing through the rest of this planning process? And we'll see if we can boil it down to as manageable of a number of priorities as possible so that at the end, the township feels like it has a feasible set of priorities that it's working with going forward. Okay, that was a lot. Any questions about where we're headed today? Okay, if any come up as we go, don't hesitate to ask. But we're going to get started with our first question. Okay, so you all have a copy of the PowerPoint slide deck in front of you, so you can follow along there if that's easier, or you can follow along on the screen. So the first questions that we're going to take a look at are questions 1 and 2, and they're the ones that are also, of course, up on the wall. And our first question there is, what are some of the best things about Wellington North, the community broadly speaking? And that's where I use that example that if you were encouraging someone to move here or to move their business here, what would be the things that you'd be telling them about this community? So I'll ask you to respond with probably 2 or 3 responses to that question. And remember, we're thinking broadly about the community as a whole. We're not necessarily talking specifically about the township yet. We'll get to the township in future questions. But right now, based on your experience or based on what you hear, what do you believe are maybe some of the best things about Wellington North as a community? And we'll give you about 5 or 6 minutes to think that through and jot down 1 response per Post-it note. I often get a question about how much detail should you put in your responses. Feel free to keep it simple. Go with sort of the high level, simple truths that you know about the community.
have any that you'd like to get to, I can start taking them up now. Yeah. Probably as good as I see you're printing product necker. Is that what you call that? That a teacher who called it chicken scratch once. We've got a few more minutes, so don't worry if you're not done yet. Any others? Okay, we'll take a couple more. If any more signal there, otherwise we'll jump to the next question. See a bit of writing. Waiting in a minute or so. Sure.
Okay, so already seeing some awesome stuff here. Not surprisingly, one that I kind of got a sense of as soon as I arrived today, just from a quick drive up from Guelph. Small town atmosphere, community pride, people being friendly and neighborly, people willing to participate and be a part of solutions in the community. A good mix of people in terms of different demographics and skills. A lot of activities to join with the potential for others, friendly and inviting downtowns, farmers market, community events, fireworks, Canada Day, the hospital and schools, the fact that there's growth in the schools, your location, both in terms of open space and the natural environment, also the fact that you're far enough away from urban centers to enjoy peace and quiet, yet close enough to easily travel, good economic opportunity, close to major markets and amenities, low unemployment, lots of good stuff so far. So next question, and this is probably the hardest question. What's the flip side? what's the other side of the coin? And here we're thinking broadly about the community as a whole. What would be potentially some of the areas where there's either untapped potential or room for improvement in Wellington North or the communities in Wellington North? And here we're thinking really broadly about the whole area. But where have you thought to yourself over the years, I wish we were doing that, or we could do that if we put our minds to it? Or why has no one ever thought to, kind of fill in the blank on those kinds of questions? But where could there be rooms to improve? Where could there be room to improve, really broadly speaking, in the community as a whole? And it doesn't have to be exclusively the job of the township to do it. Okay, so this can be bigger stuff. It can also be smaller, easier wins that you can think about. But where's their untapped potential, or where's there room for improvement for Wellington North broadly? And again, I'll ask for 2 or 3 ideas from each person and just jot your thoughts down on those post-it notes. We'll take about 5 minutes. It's the worst question in the world, but you have permission to be a little bit critical or a little bit negative and phrase it as an opportunity for improvement. Oh, we can move them around if you want to, or you can repeat them.
Does anyone have any more of those?
Okay, some more good stuff here standing out pretty quickly. So one concept that we have is that on the one hand, it's a really tight-knit community, which is fantastic. On the other hand, that's pretty tricky if you're a newcomer. It might be hard to feel welcome, or it might be hard to kind of break in. Another sense that there's a real lack of employees for employers in the area, so a shortfall of people. That's kind of a nice problem to have. Housing built geared to local income, need for more community safety, improved promotion of Wellington North in terms of promoting your community's economic, social, and cultural assets. More commerce with the potential to shop more locally. Relationships between neighboring townships and service clubs. Still a bit of a stigma between Arthur and Mount Forest, and a few things related to recreation, a need for more recreational opportunities, specifically for youth and seniors, and a need for better community rec spaces and hubs. So, I mean, it all sounds like pretty pragmatic stuff so far, and all the kind of thing that can be approved upon, but we'll need some priorities. So our next question we're going to head to in a second is a set of questions that's related more specifically to the township as a corporation specifically. So the first questions were about Wellington North as a community or as communities. Whoops. Now we're going to focus specifically on the township itself as a corporation. And we've got two big questions for you here. The first one is, what are the top strengths of the township as a corporation? In other words, what does it do well? And what might it be better at than some of its peers or other municipalities? But what would you say are some of the top strengths of the township as a corporation? If somebody were to say to you, you know, what does your township do extremely well? How would you answer that? So we're looking for 2 or 3 responses to that. And then we're going to do, of course, the other side of the coin. But let's start with the assets first. What are some of the top strengths of Wellington North as a township? We'll take one last minute on this one. It's working ahead. Okay. So top strengths of the township as a corporation. So also some clear themes coming in here. A big one seems to be the staff, sense that people really try to accommodate residents where possible, that people respect each other within the team, that the township staff are engaged directly in community well-being. They listen, they're approachable. So a huge sense that the staff know what they're doing and that they're in it for the right reasons. Also some comments around fiscal responsibility, priorities to improve infrastructure for growth, openness or friendliness for development growth, and careful planning for the future in terms of finances. An interest in helping to create a stable environment in terms of economics and lifestyle, agricultural community infrastructure, preserving rural areas in terms of prime agricultural land, and a culture of transparency, honesty, and disclosure, and a big one, winter maintenance for roads, and then responsiveness to local needs and service delivery tailored to community needs. We'll go on to the next question, and then I'm going to circle back on both of these just to see if there's any surprises or any additions to these ones. But let's move to the next question here, which would be, what are some areas for potential improvement for the township as a corporation? So when you think about the feedback that you get from the community, what's it most often about? What are some opportunities that the township could consider for its own development or its own improvement as a corporation? Okay, some thoughts about potential improvements for the township. One, better communication with residents, increasing community involvement and engagement for common interest, infrastructure in terms of roads, some ideas around human resources in terms of employee retention, work-life balance, redundancy and contingency planning and succession, a need for more businesses for local shopping, an interest in trying to get out of the way of service delivery once a project has been approved. There's still an us versus them mentality, and that's getting better, but it could improve. Maybe similar, the idea of more and better partnerships to share resources for mutual gain, leveraging and building additional partnerships and doing more with those. Long-term planning ahead, and a better, more coherent vision for the future in the face of change, maintaining a small town atmosphere and look with heritage buildings. Does this say promoting our ag roots more? Maybe. I think that says promoting our ag roots more, and then growth and its impacts on neighborhoods and settlement areas. So when you think about some of the challenges that you've just heard or the opportunities for improvement, as well as some of the top strengths of the township that we looked at earlier in terms of winter maintenance, the strengths of the team and its commitment to service delivery, your strengths in fiscal responsibility and careful planning for future finances, excellence in terms of core service delivery, your contributions to preserving rural areas and helping to create a stable environment, agricultural community and infrastructure, and values around transparency, honesty, disclosure. These strengths, those opportunities for improvement. Did anything surprise anyone? Was there anything there that felt like, oh, I wasn't expecting that, or I thought that might be a strength or a challenge for us? Or are there any questions that you have about anything that seems missing that maybe you'd like to add? I promise it's not a trick question. I don't have anything to mind. It's just anything in mind. It's just a double check.
Just an interesting thing from my own perspective is we talked in this one, we talked more about an internal focus, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talked about the strengths we have internally. And then when we switch over here, at least from my comments too, I went external.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we got a lot of strength inside. We didn't really talk about how to strengthen inside like we did talking about the strengths over here.
Well, it sounded, yeah, why do you think that is? What?
Well, and maybe we don't survey back and it's not bad.
Well, either that or, you know, we've got such a strong team inside that we're not as focused on that in terms of looking for improvement.
Is there anything about the things that you have more influence over, internal, and the things that you have less control over, being externally driven things, or things that are dependent on partnerships or others, or getting agreement, like that kind of stuff? Anything strike anyone as missing? Does anyone want to quickly write out any more additions that you'd like me to put up? Okay, if anything occurs on any of these questions as we keep rolling, feel free to write something out and let me know where you'd like it put up. But we're going to go to this really interesting question. And this is in response to the community satisfaction survey that you just had done. So that was a statistically significant survey. So it means that you can take the results of that and treat them as credible. And one of the things that, you know, kind of came leaping out of that was the sense that there is a really high sense of satisfaction from the community with the quality of life in the township, the overall services provided by the township, and there's a sense that people are receiving good value for their tax dollars. So it's a really good thing to hear as a township and as a community. So this question might seem a little bit funny, but this question is kind of to get at what are some of the really good things that are happening right now that you want to make sure don't fall off the table or get prioritized through your planning process. So you have a really high sense of satisfaction with the community that people live in and with the services that the township is providing. What do you think is behind that? That's the question. What's driving that? Why are people so satisfied? What is the township doing, or what is it about the township that is producing or leading to such a high level of satisfaction? What might be behind that? So for once, we're not problem solving. Instead, we're looking for the good stuff here. What's driving that really high sense of satisfaction? So we'll take a few minutes with this one as well. Jot your thoughts down on those Post-its again, please.
Getting to know everyone's printing. Or writing. Oh, stop.
I thought you were being generous calling this typing.
Printing.
Or writing.
Should be texting it, Chris.
We were having a whole conversation about before the meeting.
Del Raffis would be slapping my wrists. And mom too.
Okay, we'll just take another minute or so for any additional ideas. Thank you. Okay, so we'll start going through here. A few kind of big themes and then a few other ideas as well. First one is a huge theme around fiscal responsibility and fiscal strength. So a sense that there's an ability to see progress on investments through tax dollars, that there's good fiscal management, that council cares about fiscal management, that there's good funding in place for projects from the province and the ability to leverage those dollars, that there's a strong and stable economic past and good economic future prospects. And there's a continued interest in focusing, that's different, a continued interest in focusing on excellence in terms of service delivery, employees who are proud of their community and the work that they do, the sense that people who are here or moving here are here because they like the communities and what they offer. So people are seeking out the community for the things that it has. So it makes sense they would like it. Also a really big theme here about a sense of involvement and personal ownership of the community as a whole from its residents. The sense that the community is caring together or coming together better, that there's a good sense of community pride, that residents themselves are caring and they know that they're being thought about when decisions are being made, and that there's a sense of belonging and ownership in terms of the pride that residents have in their community. Some questions too about the telephone survey that was conducted, just in terms of, you know, did it reach a representative sample of the community? So I might, through you, Mayor Lennox, turn this one to Brooke.
Thanks, Chris. Through you, Mayor Lennox. The design of the survey was intended to reach a representative population in terms of both demographics and age. So they would be doing a random sampling of calls in order to get the number of respondents that they could use in order to match kind of the number of respondents and the types of respondents with the demographics of the overall community. So that's part of the methodology that is used as a standard. And that's what makes it something that communities can kind of reliably use as an input for this type of work.
Okay, so in phase one of planning, then the township sought out a representative sample of the community so that you can have some confidence in those survey results. So whatever the good things are that are happening, that are driving that sense of satisfaction and that confidence, it's good if we can kind of zero in on that stuff and keep it kind of at the forefront for the township. I often throw in a question like this because I don't know if you've experienced this before, but when you're working with a lot of strategic plans, it's a little bit like a pendulum on a clock. You know, we focus on the stuff that matters right now and the stuff that feels urgent, the stuff that feels like it's going off the rails. And we should focus on that stuff because it needs attention, obviously. But sometimes when we focus only on that stuff, we lose track of the really good things that are going on. And it sounds like there's a lot of really good stuff going on as well. So as we try to work our way through this process towards a set of strategic priorities for the township, one of the things that we can try to keep an eye towards is making sure that we see opportunities to improve, but also opportunities to maintain good things that are already going on. So that's some of what we've been looking at here. And it's a bit of a segue to the last question that we're going to look at before we probably take a quick break. This last question I mentioned identifies 6 of the priorities that community members said were things that could be improved. So while the township has a really high satisfaction rate in terms of the services that are provided, quality of life, and a sense that tax dollars are generating good value, and while all of these things had a high sense of satisfaction as well, there was a sense that if you want to improve, these are some areas to think about improving. So the first is recreation facilities, activities, and events. Second is road maintenance and repair. Third is community safety. Fourth is communications between residents and the township. Fifth is growth management. And sixth is affordable housing. So I'm going to ask you to respond to this question a little bit differently than the ones that we've been doing so far. So here, I'm looking for really specific ideas and encouraging you to kind of reach right into the weeds, really specific opportunities to improve. Anything that you've experienced yourself or that you've seen with your own knowledge or heard from community members is all kind of fair game here. But we're looking for really concrete, actionable ideas about how we could make improvements in any of those areas. So you don't have to respond to every single one of those areas. You can respond to the ones where you feel like you have a concrete solution or a concrete idea that we could take forward in the planning process. So I would suggest each person try to share 3-ish ideas, 3, 4, something like that. And I'll ask you to respond to a specific area. So if you have a concrete idea around an improvement for recreation, then you can jot that on a Post-it note and we'll put it up by recreation over there. If you have a concrete idea for affordable housing, we'll put it over in that area. We don't necessarily have to cover off all of the areas either. So just go with the ones where you feel like you've got something that you can share. And if we see some blank pages at the end of this, that just tells us we've got some work to do in those areas. And that's completely fair. So look for 3 responses from each of you. And when you're done this time, feel free to stand up and walk over and stick your Post-it note on whichever area you're responding to. So we'll probably take about almost 10 minutes on this question.
You look like you're waiting to go, Tom.
Did not realize the workshop talking meeting.
Oh.
I have to go to county meeting Thursday.
Are you driving? Get ready. Of course.
We're welcome. We're glad to have you. It's okay.
Be good, Tom.
Being a captive audience thing. Okay, we'll take maybe a couple of more minutes to wrap up any thoughts for this one. And as soon as you do, feel free to pop those Post-it notes up. Okay, let's put any last ideas up. Okay, thank you, everyone. We've got a nice smattering of ideas across all of the priority areas that have been coming from community so far. I won't go through all of them in detail, but we'll just kind of do a bit of a sampling of what we have here. And I have to admit, there's the one that has my curiosity the most is I saw this one go up early. It was a comment that went right between road maintenance and repair and recreation activities. And I immediately had to know what that one was. I see some obstacle courses maybe. Okay, so we've got a mixture of ideas up here. One flagging that for something like recreation, it's important that there be some user fees to help generate some revenue in terms of what's going on there. An emphasis for more events for young families and balancing the need for those to be low cost or free. An importance in terms of engaging youth community leaders on ways to improve services that are geared to their needs. Road maintenance and repair, ideas around increasing resources towards infrastructure use and renewal, i.e. something like a dedicated tax revenue. Question of whether there's any possibility of using a material on the road when filling in potholes that would be more sustainable. For community safety, an interest in seeing things like better childcare access, increased access to healthcare, such as more doctors or nurse practitioners, increasing or addressing the OPP service level with the county, When we're looking at communications between residents and the township, possibilities like dedicated communications roles, holding more community information meetings on a regular schedule, and or engaging community members where they are, so at service clubs or at sporting events. Growth management, looking at ideas like more stakeholder and resident meetings to communicate growth impacts and concerns. So increasing the level of dialogue there. More focus on intensification and keeping most growth within existing boundaries. So that connects with an idea that we heard before about preserving agricultural land and affordable housing. Some ideas here, such as some requirements around housing that is affordable, looking at facilitating and funding a community example to attract broader participation, and by defining affordable, to have developers include a percentage, even if small, in their developments. So lots of really specific ideas to put forward in terms of the planning process. Everybody was definitely working. I felt like I was administering some kind of horrendous exam. Everybody's heads were down and the pens were scratching. So awesome. Thank you very much. And I think I'll turn it back to the mayor now.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And I think you said you wanted like 15 minutes, 10, 15?
Say 10.
Okay. So it's 4:25. If we could reconvene at 4:35 or thereabouts, we'll recess until then. Thanks.
Stuff, Chris, you're recording it all up to.
I was gonna say, could we take pictures of those, or will we be getting,
I mean, I think we can do the pictures of everything and send them out to everybody, if that is helpful. Yeah, absolutely. We'll be, recording all of it to get all together in a summary for, but. Pictures. So there are some refreshments if you need a bit of a sugar hit. Get through the rest of the session here. For nothing.
Yeah, it was great, actually. I didn't have too many. And we most of the year on Saturdays. Pretty much got everything. Pretty good. Interesting stuff. Yeah. Half the people like what's it's a very good place to put that, Chris. Half the people like what you're doing, half the people don't.
Always, right? Third of our channel.
Somehow.
I've seen some interesting experiments done, particularly with budget savings and grant around literally doing activities with people where you put an awful money on the table and saying, balance the budget.
Says in the growth management and we still have kind of lots of your end. Oh wow.
Yeah.
3 years of the DIAs to be together and social changes. And having a meeting with our BIA members, the whole towns and chambers. Why not?
I lived and worked in Cambridge for a decade.
Oh, yeah.
So that
Good.
Cambridge,
Oh, Hesper and
all of that.
Did you hear about Jeff?
Yeah.
I can't even retire in the podcast.
They're in DC and
So, yeah, we can ask them. You finally get Jeff's birthday?
No.
Yeah, he can just about that.
Yeah, well, the sun was in hot over there.
Yeah, he could Justin was got back as a trial. On the train, he couldn't find it. Yeah, the class ones. Yeah, just not good.
You never know.
Yeah, I mean, he had just turned 55 and it's supposed to be his birthday. Get away from the sun. No, it's a new perspective. Yeah.
And now,
Yes. Yeah.
they took track your best. The two of them.
Yeah.
And
That's right. Yes.
and
That's
they're
right.
able to build a team and
Yeah, they're getting a bunch of support. They're all can.
broke track your.
Yeah.
Fruits not for the afternoon.
Fruits and evening thing.
Morning, lunch. Exactly. Well,
They don't. Finish with the question of the day. Sugar or eating carbohydrates?
Like water or any.
Welcome back, everyone. So we'll turn it back over to Chris. Lead us through the next section, please.
Thank you very much. And we have one more question for today. Unfortunately, it's the hardest one of the day. Nothing like finishing with a doozy. But so the last question for you is, when you consider your thoughts and your responses through all of the questions we've looked at already, what are the main takeaways that might be starting to kind of percolate in the back of your mind? You know, when you heard each other's responses, when you saw some of the greatest strengths and the greatest opportunities for the community as a whole, when you see the strengths of the township as a corporation, its opportunities for improvement, when you think about some of the things that it might be doing well, the challenge now is that we need to start working our way down to a few kind of key priorities or key things that at least at this stage seem like they're important. Things that could be important to continue, things that it could be important to start or improve. So what I'm going to ask you to do in a moment is identify the top 3 to 5 things that seem the most important to you based on everything that you've seen up on the walls, the things that you've shared yourself, but the things that you've heard your colleagues on council share as well. And so to give you a chance to kind of recap that, I'm going to ask everyone to stand up and to make your way around the room, just kind of taking in what you see up on the wall. And as you do that, you can start creating a little bit of a short list for yourself of the 3 to 5 things that are starting to kind of hold your attention the most, the things that you think might be really important for the township to consider over the next 3 years as priorities. So the first part of this is simply to stand up, and you can bring the small orange Post-it notes with you if you'd like, or you can leave them at the desk. But just take a quick tour around the room, let's say in the next minimum 5, maximum 10 minutes. And when you're ready, head back to your seat and then one idea per Post-it note. What do you think the top 3 to 5 ideas might be? And you'll notice I've strategically given you only 5 Post-it notes. Okay, so up on your feet as soon as you're ready and take a look. You'll notice some new green Post-it notes popped up over the break. That's just me giving some labels to where we seem to have a bunch of shared ideas.
Yep. You want us to know the Chris?
No need for numbers at this point.
There'll be overlap for sure. So you can, when you write these on your Post-it notes, you can put it in your own. So if you see things that are important, but you want to combine the idea, you can definitely.
So we're looking for the top 3 to 5 things that seem important to you for the township over the next 3 years. They can be big things, but they don't have to be big things. They can also be things that feel a little bit more feasible or within reach. And you can feel free to phrase them however you would like to. Another way to think about this question, if you like, is at the end of council's term, what do you want to say? Hey, we made really good progress on that. So as you write your ideas down, remember one idea per Post-it note. Try to use the orange square Post-it notes and keep the thoughts fairly concise if possible. So try to aim for 5 to 6 words, newspaper headline style.
Big headlines. But it is divided into 2. I just wasn't sure whether it was going to fill all 5 sheets or not. So.
I know that trick. And as soon as you're ready, I can start collecting them.
But notes, right?
Okay, those Chris. Oh, sorry.
Has staff gone through this yet, or are you going to, or?
We are going through some additional consultation with staff.
Yep.
Doing interviews and surveys.
Oh, good.
And then, yeah, we'll make some sessions with staff after we both of those.
Yep, good. Excuse me. How was yours?
Only once have I seen this before. It's good. It's good. So the question was, what might be the top 3 to 5 priorities for the community? And this is very early in the strategic planning process, but already at this point, there's enough kind of common thinking that we can start to cluster these into probably 4 distinct areas. There are some different ideas within them for sure. You know, everyone isn't necessarily singing from the same songbook in the same key and that kind of thing, but there are 4 really clearly important areas right now. So one has to do with communications. So communicating with residents in a variety of mediums, especially designed for younger residents, and doing a better job of communicating strengths and building pride. So communications already something that seems important. Also seeing an emphasis on encouraging partnerships and the idea of collaboration between businesses, service clubs, employees, council, staff, developers, getting people onto the same page in terms of some common goals for the good. And that might look like greater partnerships for recreation, for excellence in services, for sharing best practices. And it definitely involves volunteers and community support. But this idea of let's build it together and let's do it together for the benefit of everyone. There's another big cluster around, I like the way this has been phrased, maintaining the gain. So there's recognition that there's excellent service delivery right now. There's a sense of community belonging. There's an interest in integrating newcomers and maintaining good financial management, maintaining good service levels, increasing recreation opportunities and green spaces. The idea that choices do also have to be made in terms of things like hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure, that there's a balancing that has to happen there, and maintaining a sense of community with existing residents and people who are moving here. And then last but not least, that one might tie up into that first one around community involvement too. Last but not least, a big theme here, there's a lot in it, around having really strong vision and planning through both employee succession planning and growth planning and management for the corporation, leaving the township on a plan for the next 10 to 20 years. So you can think of this as building a foundation. It's a plan for growth in terms of creating a plan, communicating it, bringing others along, integrating. We're seeing housing a lot in here as an emphasis, and the idea of kind of building a quality, environmentally sound, friendly community, particularly for families. So planning that balances the needs of everyone that's involved and starts to set out some criteria on what would constitute good planning in terms of housing, environmental sustainability, fiscal responsibility, and leaving the township with a good foundation for the next 10 years. So early in the planning process, but normally something like that would have about 15 distinct themes in response to a question that's asking for 3 to 5. So there's obviously some past discussion that's also helping drive what seems important now. So we'll leave it here. Next steps in terms of the process include staff engagement. Once we've done that, we'll combine what we hear from staff as well as what we've heard from council. We'll take those sort of draft themes out to the community to test those with the community to see what residents and constituents think of them, to see what's missing, what can be added. And then we'll be back with a plan in the early fall. Okay, back to you, Mayor.
Thanks for that, Chris. It's kind of nice having a different kind of council meeting today. Does anybody have any questions in terms of the process at this point before we close off today's session? Okay, Karen, so I don't have an agenda in front of me. We need a confirming bylaw, right? Okay, so could I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Burke. All those in favor of confirming bylaw? That's carried. Thank you. And then for adjournment, I'll look to my right this time for a mover and a seconder, Councillor Rankin and Councillor Hearn. Should I drag this out, or is everybody happy to go home now? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We're adjourned at 5 o'clock. Just that was well-planned timing.
Thank you for this, Chris. This is good.